time that I ran a show like this. We welcome all of you after lunch. Please don't do siesta if it's not strictly necessary. This forum is about forest information system and forest monitoring. And it is trying to look a little bit beyond REDD+. You know, we've been talking so long about forest monitoring systems for REDD+, but we all know that forest monitoring is more than that. Let me take another piece of technology. We have 4 panelists today. We have Giacomo Grassi from GRC. He is in charge of this difficult task of compiling all the information of the 27 countries of the EU and making this visible and able to be reported in a consistent manner. He also had a lot of experience in the past also with the Climate Change Convention negotiations, so he knows very well what we're talking about when we talk about REDD+, LULUCF. Then we have Nur Marispatin. She is the deputy head of the REDD+ agency in Indonesia. I have to say that I have a very long respect for Nur. She really was very, very instrumental during the discussions of REDD+ in these last years, where I had the pleasure to work with her. She also had extensive experience in the ASEAN Regional Knowledge Network on Forests, coordinating of safeguards information systems in Indonesia, and also was a lead author of the Indonesian readiness strategy and the FCPF readiness documents. Then we have Lucio Santos. Lucio is a good friend of mine, and we had long discussions about discrepancies we had on methodological nitty-gritty issues. But he has been working recently for Mexico in articulating the Mexican monitoring system for forest and REDD+. He also has long experience as a reviewer of greenhouse gas inventories, as Giacomo also have. And he is today here to explain us what the challenges and how Mexico has been thinking through the monitoring system for forests in the context of REDD also. And finally, Deuteronomy Casaro is from Zambia. He's from the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture. And he is a person that, for me, it represents what I would like to be in my next life, because he is the most patient, most reflexive, and most clear-minded manager I ever seen, that really understands very well his country. So he is in charge of the National Forest Monitoring System of Zambia, that includes for REDD+, and he also works with his team on tracking REDD+ issues in Zambia. With these four panelists, I think we have the opportunity to share with you what we understand as forest monitoring systems and why we think that they may go or they may wear beyond REDD in some cases. Okay, too fast. So the overall objective of the panel is to share experience on forest information and information systems and its usefulness beyond REDD, not only for REDD, but even beyond REDD, and how best we can make those domestically relevant. Because if we want those systems to survive and to be on, this has to be relevant for domestic purposes. And in that regard, they will be sustainable on the long term. So the way we're going to organize the session is that I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction of 5 minutes, and the panelists will give you their views on four framing questions that we will see later. And finally, we will have the opportunity to have questions from the floor that the panelists will answer. And at the very end, I ask them to give you one message. Each panelist will tell you what is the message they're taking home from this discussion today. So my introduction is going to be very brief. I mean, this is a question that comes to all our minds. Why forest information is needed? And what has been the evolution of those needs? I just put together this simple slide that we have been using in several presentations, me and myself and some of my colleagues, and just look on the past. I mean, why forest information was collected in the earlier times? It was because before the 90s, timber supply was an issue, right? So we wanted to know how much timber we could bring out of the forest. In the 90s, biodiversity came in, and therefore it was more interest on including, name of a species and how many species we had in there in order to understand the biodiversity of our systems. In the 2000s, sustainable forest management concepts came in, so the information was growing, so it was a need to include economic and environmental and social information in the collection of information for forests. And finally, in 2005, we got REDD, right? STAR. Yeah? REDD got into, and then again, the importance of monitoring was, coming in the front line. And in the future, there may be some other things. We don't know, right? So it's an evolving need. And our forest monitoring systems will have to capture all those needs, because otherwise you will have parallel systems, and that won't be what you want. So the sort of information that you're looking for is, as I said before, standard forest resources, carbon stocks, biological diversity, forest health and vitality, protective functions of forests like water cycles, productive functions of forests like how much timber or how much other products we can extract, and socioeconomic functions of forest resources in relation to the stakeholders that are living in there or living from it or influencing the forest. And finally, also institutional and legal frameworks are linked to this type of information you need. And the levels are very different. The most sort of relevant level for policy making usually is the national one, but it's equally important to collect at village local communities and even forest stand as the inventory do. And the global community is more and more, benefiting from this improved information that we are collecting at the different levels. If we move to the convention, we are here in Lima for the COP20, but if you look at the convention, how the convention is looking into collection of information that forest is in there. Well, they are looking in land uses. And we have these land uses there, wetlands, forest lands, other lands, croplands, grasslands, settlements. And REDD is one part of it. Right? You see, I was trying to put a very simple scheme for you to illustrate. And there you see that LULUCF, which Giacomo will tell us about. LULUCF is a little bit bigger than REDD. Agriculture also is affected by land use, right? Some activities on agriculture. And we got even projects, CDM projects, which were very restrictive, even a small piece of this land system. But at the very end, when you are in your countries and you are trying to work, what you see is an integrated thing, right? What you see is an integrated land system. It's an integrated land management, what you're looking for. And those information systems are very relevant for that. So the forest information systems are contributing to those informations you need. What we are adding here with REDD+, with LULUCF, and with land use is this new dimension, is this climate dimension. And this climate dimension has a mitigation and adaptation component, which are new concepts, right, that we were looking for. But at the very end, all these, it is in the context of sustainable development. So the information, it is going to help you to achieve better goals of sustainable development. The key considerations that we learned when we were working with countries, I'm coming from working on trying to improve capacities in countries, is that technical knowledge and capacities, technology transfer, institutional arrangements, coordination of support if you're receiving support, sustainability and ownership are key concepts to achieve a monitoring system that you want, a forest monitoring system that you want, or a system that links to broader systems in terms of land use. So what I learned is that national ownership is extremely important. If the system is not nationally owned, it is very hard that they will be sustained. If it's not domestic demand for that. A stepwise approach that will allow for improvement over time is also important. You don't need to start perfect, Perfection is the enemy of the good, huh? And in this case, I think is a perfect sentence. You need to build upon existing capacities and systems. I mean, if you go there and you just set aside what is being done, it is very hard that the guys which are working on that will try to cooperate with you. And you probably will rebuild things that maybe they were already there. So build upon existing capacities, data, and systems in place is important, and adapt to the new needs. Strengthening national capacities is key. And it's key in the sense of that you have to move at the speed that you can by learning by doing, and use open source, freely available data and tools as much as possible. It could facilitate your life. And this, in the context of REDD+, or in the context of the UNFCCC, it will have to align with the guidance that this convention is giving to you, but it's not necessarily only serving the purposes of the convention. With this, I put several weeks ago these 4 questions to the panelists, and they are trying to answer those questions, but at the same time, not necessarily directly answering the questions, but giving their experiences on how they are going through these processes. I'm going to start with Giacomo Grassi. He is coming from USC, as I said, and he's going to illustrate us how complex to work on those issues is in the EU.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to upload it.
That's your presentation?
Okay.
No? They need to change the presentation. Can you change the presentation to the second one, please?
By the way, in the meanwhile, I introduce myself. I'm Giacomo Grassi, work in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And as Maria pointed out, in our group, we are responsible for the EU greenhouse gas inventory for the LULUCF sector, which I will shortly present here. There is a lot of ongoing work on forest information system in Europe. Specifically, the Joint Research Center, where the European Commission, where I work, has a number of activities and operating systems which are related to European Forest Information System. We go from forest mapping, work on forest pattern, biodiversity, forest fires, forest and climate change in terms of adaptation, forest ecosystem service, and land use change, and forestry, which has this LULUCF acronym that you know well. On top of that, we have a number of systems, which is the EFIS, the European Forest Information System, and the European Forest Data Center. All these will be soon merged in a forest information system for Europe, which has been foreseen by the latest EU forest strategy. This forest information system for Europe aims to integrate existing activities and systems into a modular system, which, together with the help of stakeholders and European member state countries, will include 4 different models. One will be on forest disturbances, another one on forest and bioeconomy, a third one on forest ecosystem service, and a fourth one on forest and climate change. A FISA web page is not yet available, but should be available very early next year. I think that if you are more interested, the website indicated in this slide already contains some of the basic information. Then will be integrated very soon in a broader web page. Just to give you an idea of the type of information that has been that is being collected in this system, there is a large amount of information on forest disturbance in terms of forest fire monitoring. There is the EFIS I mentioned before, forest damage assessment, forest condition, forest pest risk assessment. There is a lot of information also on forest and climate change in terms of species distribution suitability under climate change condition, and, for example, fire assessment risk. And then there are forest ecosystem services, which include forest pattern connectivity, forest carbon and carbon sequestration maps, for example, and the greenhouse gas inventory, which I will present in more detail later. A big discussion is about the amount of biomass which is available for energy purpose in Europe. And the forest information system will aim also to collect all available information on the existing and future biomass expected under different scenarios. And then finally, forest and bioeconomy, which is also related to the potential for future bioenergy, for example, which allow to explore different scenarios in relation to different economic possible projections. I will then now focus a bit more on one of the components of this forest information system for Europe, which is under construction, which is the EU greenhouse gas inventory for the LULUCF sector. EU is really a fine mosaic of different land cover and land uses over 28 different countries. We don't have probably the complex dynamics that some developing country, tropical country have, but still, believe me, we have a really rich mosaic of different land uses. Forests cover about 1/3 of the area, has improved by about 4% as compared to 1990. And we have a really rich variability in forest types, management, carbon stock, and forest data collection systems. We have, this is just to give you an idea of the wide variety of forest type we have in Europe. This heterogeneity is, of course, a enrichment in terms of biodiversity and culture, but believe me, it's really a challenge when developing an EU inventory. So what is the European inventory about? As a party to UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol, also the EU has to report annual inventory of the LULUCF sector. The EU inventory is a compilation of member countries. There is no single EU approach to collect, for example, activity data, which means area of forest and forest land use change, and emission factor, which means the carbon which is released when you deforest, for example. Each member state applies its own definition and method to estimate greenhouse gas emissions. To some extent, you may think it is, means that we are summing apples and oranges. To some extent, it's true, and I will go also further. We are a full mixed fruit salad. We have 28 different fruits, which means 28 different forest definitions, to some extent method to collect data. And the reason of that is historical economic reason. We have 28 different national forest inventory, or a system similar to national forest inventory, which have been developed starting in 19th century in some cases for many different purposes. National forest inventory in Europe have been developed not for carbon, clearly, but have been developed simply for ensuring a sustainable management of forests, ensuring that the wood resource would not deplete over time. And then in recent years, in recent decades, of course, the relevance for this information became evident also for carbon-related issues. And I will come back more in detail with that. So the approach that we have for the EU inventory is that as long as member states' inventory are calculated in accordance with EPC guidance, their sum is even more accurate than a single EU approach with single forest definition and with single method to estimate greenhouse gas emissions removal. In this context, what we do at GRC is doing the quality assurance, quality check of member states' inventory and help member states in following, to the extent possible, the IPC guidance and the overall greenhouse gas reporting principle, which, as you know, are transparency, accuracy, consistency, completeness, and comparability. These systems are broadly applicable also to REDD. As you probably know, in REDD text there is no the word comparability. My personal opinion, this is not really a big issue, because as long as you are following a PC guidance, then you are comparable. Any inventory is comparable. On top of that, REDD guidance is even more specific. For example, what does it mean completeness of information, which means allowing the data to be reproducible, which is a really useful and interesting concept. I'm not going to the detail of the table, but just to give you an idea of the fact that in Europe we have 28 different forest definitions for the problem mentioned before, because forest definitions have been developed for different purposes rather than only carbon. And the forest definition often are even complemented by other criteria that just the threshold are indicated in the table. Additional criteria could be, for example, that you may have an orchard, olive trees, which meet the forest definition by the country. But according to this predominant land use concept, which is also consistent with what country report under the FAO, this land is not considered forest, but could be considered cropland, for example. As I said, national forest inventory is, which is often complemented by remote sensing tools, is the basis for the estimates of forest area. Often land use changes is like, for example, afforestation, deforestation, are taken from other kind of activities like catastrophe registries. For example, often you have to obtain a formal authorization to deforest. So this kind of information often complements what is a sampling-based national forest inventory. Also, the method to calculate carbon stock, it's quite varies a lot in member states. Moving a bit further, we also have some of the challenge that several countries in developing countries are facing for REDD. For example, estimating deforestation may be quite challenging also in Europe because often are small and scattered events, not easily captured, for example, by sample-based national forest inventories. And also because, as you know well, land use change is not necessarily equal to land cover change. A challenge that member states are also facing is provide a completeness information in terms of reporting carbon pools. The national forest inventory initially were not designed, for example, to collect information on litter and soil organic matter. This is one of the information that has been need to be complemented for the purpose of reporting LULUCF inventory. This is just to give you an idea of how the inventories are being recalculated over time. Because national forest inventory in Europe usually are completed every 5 or 10 years, often the inventory, let's say 20% of a country is sampled every year and the full cycle is completed every 5 years. When countries have new data, this triggers a recalculation of historical data. Another way to recalculate historical data is improvement of method, moving, for example, from tier 2 to tier 2 or tier 2 to tier 3, or adding a new pool. And as you can see, these graphs show the estimates of the sink in forest land in Europe, and over the last 7 years, you can see quite many changes, which should reflect the improvement over time. Just to conclude very briefly, as I said, in Europe there is a long tradition of forest inventory developed for other silvicultural purposes. Most of the information that has been collected for traditional forest inventory is, of course, useful for LULUCF inventory. The basic information on biomass availability or tree height, these kind of things is essential. But, of course, other information had to be collected on pools which are not biomass, for example, on biomass expansion factor, carbon density. And in the context of preparing for REDD, I think that I guess that monitoring effort, as Maria told before, should focus on implementing the stepwise approach, which is explicitly mentioned in the REDD decision, which means improving estimates with time and progressively expanding to the activities and the area covered. Of course, taking into account the national specific circumstances. The construction of reference levels should focus on methodological consistency, transparency, and completeness information, so to allow any reader of the reference level to reproduce the data to the extent feasible. And accuracy should not be seen as a static objective. Remember the graph I showed you before on recalculation of estimates over time. Sometimes maybe developing countries think that developed countries have reached the accuracy of estimates. No, it's not the case. Accuracy should not be seen as a static objective, but really as a long-term process of continuous improvement. And I think this is valid in Europe and even more in the REDD context. Thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. While we change to the next presentation, unless it's one burning question for the audience that we can attend, I would like to say that what you can see when Giacomo speaks about the European Union is diversity. It is this tremendous diversity, tremendous history behind the collection of data. And that's exactly the challenge that they are facing. When we move to developing countries, REDD countries, the challenge is how to start and how to start collecting this information in a much more, harmonized and consistent way that they can use. And I think this is what exactly our three next speakers are going to reflect. So now we start with a country that it is challenging. It has many islands and many different types of forests. And Noor, please illustrate us on what are the challenges and what is the use that you think national forest monitoring systems can be for Indonesia.
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, colleague. If Giacomo shared with us about the complexity from 28 countries, I will share with you the complexity within one country, how we manage forest-related information at the complex institutional landscape in our country. I think just continue to the next. Data management and institutional setting in our country. Data relating to forest and other land-based sectors are managed by many different institutions, both at the national level and subnational level. Several systems related to carbon have been developed by different institutions. At least we have now a national GHG information system managed by Ministry of Environment, and then MRV for mitigation by Ministry of Environment, forest mitigation registry by Ministry of Forestry. It is good that now these two ministries become one ministry. There is also MRV system in our agency, and we have another system, Indonesia National Forest Carbon Accounting, that the data must be supported by some ministries. Effort to harmonize this system are ongoing. For example, a one map policy. Also, we have a case in forest fire monitoring system. Our national forest monitoring system that we have now managed by Ministry of Forestry. If you look at the guidance for National Forest Monitoring System for REDD+, from Warsaw Framework, that the system should be built upon the existing system and enable assessment of different types of forests. So what happened? Oh, sorry. Including natural forests, flexible and allow improvement over time and reflect the phased approach for REDD+ implementation. And also, National Forest Monitoring System may provide relevant information for SIS REDD+. The system that we have now, and this can be accessed from this web page. The system provides data and information for different levels at the national, provincial, and district level for land cover, forest cover, and forest cover change, and the location of permanent sample plots and temporary sample plots. The system was not designed for carbon monitoring. And although it was developed a long time before we have Warsaw Framework, the system also consistent with most element of the COP guidance. Both National Forest Monitoring System and safeguards information system are managed by the Ministry of Forestry, now Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but currently they are independent systems. And these are the related systems that managed by REDD+ agency. First, on management reporting system, monitoring and reporting system linked to national carbon accounting system. We have also funding and financing management system that's specific for REDD+, fire monitoring system, public interface and communication and ground truthing, internal management system, and client relation system. We have also joined efforts with other ministries and institutions on initiative for registering land concessions, initiative for defining spatial data, initiative for sharing data, and also for supporting the recognition on the indigenous people rights. Experience with development of forest reference emissions level. Indonesia will submit our forest reference emissions level document during the REDD day tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And the data that was needed for rail construction were managed by different institutions, the Ministry of Forestry and the National Agency for Spatial Information, also National Agency for Aeronautic and Space, Ministry of Agriculture, and many other research institutions. So the process was not only technical process, but also working together with different institutions, how to get support from them to collect the data, to share their data. So it was really a big effort to work together. Several steps were carried out to analyze the available data, especially related to the reliability, consistency, comprehensiveness, including the consistency with the data that we use in the GHG inventory for our biennial updated report, because Indonesia is also planning to submit our biennial update report this year. Many research data were available but not readily used for rail construction. And we have also several forest cover data available for national scale. But after several steps of analysis, we decided to use the Ministry of Environment and Forestry data. And then emission factor for 6 forest types were generated using the data from National Forest Inventory that distributed in the whole region of our country. Also we use research plots and most suitable allometric equation for these forest types. And we have one map policy that I mentioned earlier. This is one reference, one standard, one database, and one geoportal. And this is cross-sectoral effort, both at the national and sub-national level, through participation and collaboration. This is, in fact, the foundation towards better natural resources governance. These efforts also built on existing initiative. We have several years already initiative under National Geospatial Information Network. So we use that initiative to enhance our effort. And one reference, including transformation from indicative to operational base map, we used to rely on indicative map that create the problem in the field. There are a lot of land conflict because of overlap between licensing, between the land right, etc. So from June 2014, we are starting to work on the operational base map with the biggest scale. And one geo portal through National Geospatial System. So any institution, both at the national and subnational level, they need to contribute the data to this portal so that we have a comprehensive data stored in this portal. This is the efforts to integrate data from related institutions. That is one of our program in the REDD agency under the Deputy of Technology System and Monitoring. We develop through participatory and collaboration, supporting partners and building the bridge. It's not only bridging the gaps, but also building the bridges so that no longer gaps in the future. And encourage the use of open source, participating in information distribution. And these are the existing institutional setting, and each institution also has their own data network. So we have to work with this approach. Sorry. Oh my God. What is it? Yeah. So we have to work in this landscape.
Can you try to put it back?
So we have to work in this landscape, and REDD Plus agency trying to harmonize every information system that we need to, or we have to provide based on the mandate from for each institution. And this is one example. Forest fire monitoring system. We collect the data from all related ministries and institutions, and even our international partner. And the system also mirror with the system in all related ministries. We have also a mechanism for ground truthing involving communities, local governments, even the police agency. So these are the approach that we are trying to build within the complex system we have. And it's not only on the forest monitoring, forest monitoring system, but also include all land-based sector. Thank you, María.
Thank you very much, Nur. Before we pass to the next speaker, I think it's a very good illustration on how complex it can be to really make sense of all the information that is available. And it's not just going there and starting from scratch, but rather the challenge is to connect all those dots. Now, next speaker it is Lucio Santos, and he's going to also, I think, tell us about how Mexico was thinking through what a monitoring system should be for, and how to also bring all those pieces together. So, Lucio, please.
Thank you, María, for the invitation. Thank you to FAO to invite Mexico to share its experience in the process of developing and implementation of MRV system. The presentation will have two parts. The first one is about the main milestones in the process of starting, developing, and implementation of MRV system, and in the second part, I try to address the key question presented by María at the beginning of this panel. So before starting the developing of and implementation of MRV system in Mexico, three main guidances was choose to support the decision-making process through during the development of the system. And the first one was to build the system upon the existing systems. The second one was about allow for improvement of existing tools and instruments in the circumstances of Mexico. And the third was avoid talking about of MRV as a general subject, but try to separate the discussion, talking about the components of the National Forest Monitoring System, or talking about the process of reporting and verification. These issues has facilitated exchange and feedback from the stakeholders, because has improved the understanding on each one of the components of the MRV system. So regarding the first part, the first task was clearly identify the national framework to make sure that Mexico will have a multi-purpose national forest monitoring system within the national framework. So in this process was identified the principal laws related with all this process, in this case the climate change law and the forestry law, and three components was identified or were identified in this process. The first one, the institutional framework and the elements for planning, financing, evaluation, inspection, and surveillance to let achieve the objectives on mitigation and adaptation that are setting in the climate change law. The second dimension of this process of identification of national circumstances was the institutional arrangement in place. It was very important because it's supposed to be very clear about the roles, responsibilities, and mandates of different federal institutions and subnational institutions regarding the necessary functions from the National Forest Monitoring System. And the third dimension was to identify the tools to support the enforcement of the forestry and climate change policy. And in that case, as you can see in the slide, was identified different systems managed for different federal institutions, as the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory, the official land use cover maps called series INEGI, which responsibility to produce this kind of information is the National Institution from Geographic and Statistical Information, the National Forest and Soil Inventory, and the National MRV System pointed out also in the framework of the law. So as you can see, the challenge about the cross-institutional coordination to achieve a tool that really responds to all these framework was very huge during this process. So with the identification of the main system in place, in order to ensure the improvement of this system, and I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, Mexico began the work, for example, to improve the official land use cover map from 3 points of view. The first one, to produce geographical information with higher resolution, to increase the temporality for the generation of this geographic information, and to make sure that it will be available for different levels, national and subnational, to support the decision-making process. Regarding the file data, and to allow the reproducibility, and about the more than 100 information of variables that are collected in the National Forest and Soil Inventory in Mexico, the main variables related to the estimation of carbon were identified in order to develop a protocol to ensure the transparency and reproducibility of information to the National Forest Information System, and with that respond to the necessities of the country in order to integrate this information and generate the greenhouse gas estimation of emission, for example, to the biennial update report and the national communication. So far, the main elements of the process to identify, improve, design, and implement the National Forest Monitoring System in the framework of the guidance that are given by the decision of the COP. Right now, I try to answer the questions that María has suggested. So, for the first one, are the information system in the context of REDD uses beyond of the estimated of carbon? As I tried to show in the previous slide, just that, yes, because it plays a key role at different levels of the environmental and forest policy of Mexico. Important number of federal institutions are involved in this process, so the decision to involve all these institutions during the process of the design and implement the system was very key for the implementation of the system. As you can see also, the elements of the National Forest Monitoring System by themselves are core elements of different information tools for decision making, so it's not possible to have this element disconnected. And finally, therefore, is imperative, or was imperative during the process, this close coordination with different national institutions to ensure that the efforts that are put to develop this National Forest Monitoring System will be sustainable in the time. For the second question, how the data collected contribute to improving global estimates and information. In general, in Mexico consider that to improve or to ensure the systematic knowledge of the ecological and floristic condition and the knowledge about the landscapes, the different landscapes of the country, it's very important to ensure the comparability of the data and the continuity of the long term of information. So is that we are trying to ensure during this effort of develop and implementation the National Forest Monitoring System. It was very important also the consensus building and the synergies developing between the different federal institutions that are involved in the different components of the systems. This, of course, mitigate probably conflicts, institutional conflicts, but the most important is that improve the confidence in the results that the country and the different institutions present before the stakeholders at different levels. About how this information system improve the actions on the ground, we are talking about here about the subnational level and how this information generated with the National Forest Monitoring System will support the, as instrument, the decision-making process to land management. As you can see, here is not important the estimation of carbon, but the information provide timely, for example, on the dynamics of change in the landscape level, in order to identify, for example, the drivers and agents of change in the landscape. And for that, it's not important the estimates of carbon, but the timely information provided with the necessary temporality. And this was the characteristics that we are trying to improve in throughout the development of the National Forest Monitoring System. Finally, how can the National Forest Monitoring System be made sustainable and cost-effective? We would like just to share a conclusion of a study that was made about the learned experiences of the National Forest and Soil Inventory in Mexico. And one of the most important conclusion was the decision made 10 years ago to develop a multi-purpose inventory. This was a very wise decision, which allowed, for example, now to have in advance an extensive and robust set of variables, for example, to adapt right now to the necessities of the National Forest Monitoring System. And this same logic or rationale was taken into account in the developing of National Forest Monitoring System. Also, the development of a sound legal framework to ensure the mandatory implementation of forest policy instruments, such as the National Forest Inventory and satellite land monitoring. This committed to the executive and legislative powers to provide appropriate financial resource to the sustainability of the system in the long term. And final, very, very important also, the advice and finance of international organization and experts is very useful to accelerate the design and implementation of the system in that process, all that in the context of the international collaboration, as long as it is conducted under the principle of neutrality and not intrusive and respect to the decision-making process within the countries. So this is, I would like to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucio. I think it's a very good illustration that is not only about the data, but also about the process. And it's very clear that all the speakers before were highlighting that there is to construct upon existing systems. There is to connect existing systems. And I think Lucio made a very good point also, which is it's a multi-purpose, but if you get support, please make sure that this support aligns with what you're doing. And he used the word neutrality, which I never hear about in this context, but it's a good word. If we support countries in this task, we have to be neutral and we have to be aligned with their needs. So, Deuteronomy, please tell us about Zambia.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll present on the same making forest information system work for REDD Plus and beyond. And I will base the presentation basically on the questions that were asked. But first I should say that the forest monitoring system in Zambia is basically decentralized, and that's how we have designed it under the readiness process. So we have 10 provinces, and all the 10 provinces have got GIS units that have been set up that are expected to feed the national system. And this process and the management system is based in the forestry department, which has offices in all the 104 districts in the country. So basically it's just to indicate that Zambia is about 752,000 square kilometers, and our deforestation rate is between 250 and 300,000 hectares. And the main drivers of deforestation are agricultural practices, unsustainable agricultural practices, charcoal production, infrastructure development as the main ones that drive deforestation. Now, in terms of the questions that were put forward, the first one on information systems in the context of REDD Plus, namely National Forest Monitoring System used beyond the estimates of carbon. Yes, I think carbon is a term that has, of course, come in now, but I think we have been conducting these forest inventories, biophysical and the socio-economic surveys for some time, and have been feeding in the planning process of the country, and not necessarily carbon. Of course, trying to estimate forest resources, land use and planning, and of course the livelihoods of people, trying to understand how forests are linked to people. And therefore I should just say that the forest monitoring system that are now being probably emphasized on because of the REDD process that we are in will actually enhance the work that we have previously been doing in the process of planning for forests and land use. The next question was, how can data collected contribute to improved global estimates and information? We believe that to contribute to the national or international community or international information, it's important to recognize that the data that we collect at local level is the one that feeds into the district, and then from the district it feeds into the provincial system. If these systems are effective and systems that are reliable, then we expect that the information at international level or the international system will then be effective. So basically we still feel the levels, all the levels must be recognized that need to be involved in the forest monitoring system. And of course, if we have accurate local level information, then we expect that we are going to have a more reliable discussions at international level. If we are the countries we come from, we have reliable information, I think even when we come to international conferences like this one, we should be able to discuss based on informed decisions. In terms of how will information system improve the actions on the ground, the first one is that it will help provide an up-to-date information for planning. And as I mentioned in the Zambian context, we have decentralized this system. So when it's fully functional, we expect that the information that is available will be available at the right level, at provincial level or district level. So this system will really help in the planning process. And of course, it will also be very easy to access information at local level because the system now, with, of course, support that we have received, we've been able to set up this system at a lower level. And it means there will be information available at that level. And the other point is that when people are involved in doing something, they feel attached to that process. And if they feel attached to that process, they own the process. And I think that's basically what we have tried to put in place, that people that really see and understand what is going on around them should be able to contribute to this system. So at local community level, including the communities themselves, should be able to feed into this process. And in the end, we expect that this will build confidence in the technical staff, that they will be able to provide guidance with confidence in the planning process. Then finally, there was a question on how the National Forest Monitoring System can be made more sustainable and cost-effective. We feel that the decentralized approach to National Forest Monitoring System is one way of making it a long-term and more effective system. In starting the system, it might be expensive, but in long term, it becomes quite cheaper or economic to undertake any various activities other than at national level. It also will provide the opportunity for capacity building at field level, the level that we are involved in or we expect to get results from. And of course, for it to be more effective, it has to be mainstreamed within government system so that it's just part and parcel of the government operations instead of it being looked at as a project that is being undertaken. So we feel that with this, then we expect that we are going to have a long-term sustainable system, the forest monitoring system, that is not dependent on probably extensively on external support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deuteronomy. I think it is quite encouraging to hear that the system you're building is going to be a tool for planning, and that your aim is to streamline into other government institutions and systems. It is also important to hear that it is important at all levels, so not only at the national level but also at the local level. But it still will contribute to improvement of global information data. With this, I would like to open the floor for questions. You can either way address yourselves the 4 questions or address questions directly to some of the panelists or all of them.
Hello, thank you for your presentations. My name's Will Kimber from the Australian Government. I'm interested in the panel's views about your thinking in terms of the land sector's role in any future agreements and how you see the importance of these national MRB systems in underpinning your national climate policy, and any early thinking you might have about the process for 2015 as we lead up to Paris.
I guess we can take 2 questions and then go to Francis. Gentleman in the front.
Good afternoon. I'm Roger Garinga from the Philippines. I would like to ask a question about how for the panelists from Zambia. The system looks like a bottom-up approach, while the other comes from the global information system. I would like to know in the bottom-up approach, how does it? I mean, do you complement that with a geographic information system? And in the same manner, the presentation from EU, is there also a community complementation and generating the data? And the second question I would like to ask is about how the community access information to make them more informed in terms of decision making, except for the Zambia where it said that the information is really generated from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think let's go for the concrete question first. So Deuteronomy, I think it was more directed to you, and then we go for the general question that you can answer, each of you or whoever feels you have an answer to the question. So if I understood well, it is about that you need to have a bottom-up approach, and how you relate this bottom-up approach with across the country. I think this is what it was tried to be indicated. And then how the local people access the information as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. In terms of the system that we have initiated, I should say initiated, because actually in the long term the idea is that it should start from the district and then it feeds up. So the way the system has been designed in such a way that at national level, that's where the main office or forest headquarters has the main national forest monitoring system, and instead of just working at headquarters to generate the information that is required, it will be the provinces that we will be working and provide. The role of the national level system or the national office will be to verify or validate that and then change the national system or report on what has happened in different sectors in relation to land use. And in terms of how the communities will benefit, well, this is basically maybe GIS might be too complicated but the communities, but what is expected is that the staff that work in government, because in these provinces that I've talked about, there is a multi-sectoral team. There is agriculture, forestry, provincial planning unit, and a civil society representative there. So it means that whatever information is required for planning will still trickle down to these institutions, for example, agriculture and forestry that work with local communities. And they are able now to feed this or generate or discuss issues with local communities and then upload this information into the system. So it's more like supposed to be a feedback mechanism. It's, even at provincial level, we don't expect it to be done mainly by technical officers, but the officers that work with communities at field level. Yeah.
The other question was a bit more challenging. I mean, I put a slide in my introduction that was trying to come from the past, and the question that is being put forward our colleague from Australia is looking to the future. So how you see that the systems you're building may be relevant for the land use treatment and challenge and discussions that are being put forward in the ADP, I suppose, in the Durban platform. So looking forward. So looking forward, how you think your systems are going to be relevant for that and help you to get a good agreement.
Yes. In terms of the future, I must say that while demand for information seems to be increasing, but slowly we are trying to start thinking maybe together or in a similar way. While there are more issues that come up, I'm sure by 2020 there will be more issues that will come up, but I think so far everyone is recognizing that we should start thinking in a more broader sense. Just taking an example of this Global Landscape Forum, it used to be a forest forum. It's changed to a global forum. It's almost the same thing, but it's like we are now thinking together. And I believe that the system that we are developing now as a National Forest Monitoring System still captures the information that we may need in future, only that some of it might not be relevant now because people may not demand for it. But in the future, we will certainly use the same. I can give an example of, for example, the forest inventories that are ongoing in Zambia. We have a national forest inventory that is coming to an end this December. We have collected the biophysical data, and the central statistics, which is under Ministry of Finance, is leading the process of the socio-economic aspect of it. So with all this information, including all the pools that we are talking about, it's more like extracting information you may need now, and then you leave what you don't need. In the future, when the demand is high, we will still extract the other information that might be required. Yeah.
So, Indonesia, Nur, how you see your system moving forward for the future challenges?
Thank you, Maria. For Indonesia, through the bilateral cooperation with Australia several years ago, we actually started to develop a national carbon accounting system that cover all land-based sector. Unfortunately, during that period of the collaboration, it's only the forestry sector that could progress. And I think for anticipating the future, we could adjust or revisit that system and adjust where necessary. And in terms of how we will anticipate for the agreement, up to now we really don't know how we will start. Or maybe we could also have agreement, at least a program of work, how we will move in the future under the agreement for post-2020. This is just what we could see at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nur. Giacomo, what are still the challenges in Europe to reach that point?
Well, the way I see the land sector is clearly a fundamental component of any future climate agreement, both for mitigation and adaptation. For the mitigation component, I see a big occasion in the coming months because parties have been required to provide so-called upfront information to provide clarity, transparency, to allow a better understanding and comparability of the intended national determined contribution. As you know that, especially for developed country, for unassigned country, there has been traditionally a bit of skepticism on the real mitigation role of LULUCF. Has been always seen as a strange animal, complex for sure. I think that in the coming months, the information that party will provide in the upfront information for national determining contribution will be a good occasion to clarify in a transparent way the potential and positive role that LULUCF has on mitigation. But since it's not only mitigation, it's also adaptation, I think that we have been talking before about the importance that the information system underlying MRV system are as more multifunctional as possible? Well, I think that the more this multifunctionality of the underlying information system, the more the system are multifunctional, the more it will be easier to demonstrate the essential link between adaptation and mitigation, which I think will be a key element of any future climate agreement.
Thank you, Giacomo. Lucio, what's your experience so far?
Okay, I will remain of the...
Don't need to limit to Mexico. Just give us your...
I prefer to remain in the technical part of the question about the role of these systems in the future agreement in post-2020 and the role of the sector. For sure, if the adequate ownership is guaranteed within the countries, this system will provide transparent, more accurate information at the political level in order to understand in a best way which can be the role of the sector in the future agreement.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the floor? Please, go ahead. First is the gentleman there first, and then...
Thank you very much. I'm Richard Kapere from Uganda, and I'm asking Indonesia on the one map policy. I'm just wondering what powers that map has in terms of the legal powers. Was it something which was sanctioned by Parliament, so that if there is any contention within that map by any agency or individual, if you take it to the court, that map can be used as a tool to make a decision? Thank you.
Second question.
Thank you. Riley Duran from NASA. There are a number of efforts underway around the world to develop the next generation of science and technology to address forest information needs. And I believe there's a move towards merging the top-down or centralized approach with more bottom-up, community-level, provincial-level data sets. In other words, bringing them together so it's both, not either or. I'd like to ask a hypothetical. Setting aside the cost of these systems, assuming that the cost can come down, ideally free data sets, if there were a perfect centralized forest data set or information set with information at the local or community level, what are the barriers that you see to acceptance and ownership at the community level, at the provincial level, so that it could be part of the national forest monitoring systems? Thank you.
Thank you. So please feel free to answer. Who wants to start answering the two questions? You were targeted again.
Okay. Yes, the first question was, I think, specific to Indonesia, I think. I take it that way. But, of course, in the Zambian case, if I may just respond a bit to the Ugandan question, we have the Minister of Lands, a Surveyor General, that endorses maps, and he is responsible, or the office is responsible for any legal implications. But in terms of barriers to the central system, even if it became cheaper, for me, the barrier is if I am not the one involved in doing something, it will always be very difficult to accept that system. I mean, that's a simple way I can put it. It's always good to involve people, let them feel that they are participating or they are helping a system, than just to do your accurate assessment at national level, then you take that document to a district and say, this is your situation in your district. I think it doesn't provide that sense of ownership in any system. And in the end, people might not associate themselves with that system. So whether the system becomes cheaper, it will always be good to still let the local people do the work, and then at national level just consolidate what you have. For me, it's just ownership. I think it's one of the most important things.
Yeah. So, what will be your reflection?
Yeah, there was a question for Indonesia, but I couldn't hear.
We couldn't hear very well.
Yeah, so that's
maybe
about one map policy, was it?
Maybe I talk slowly. What I was asking you, you know, that one map policy, it is having a lot of information in it in terms of the data. And someone can contest what is contained in that map. Maybe the boundary of a forest has encroached somebody's land. Now, in that situation, who sanctioned that one map policy? Is it Parliament of Indonesia? So that it has the powers that you can take it with you to the courts of law, and then say, this is what we have as our map for this country. And therefore, where it is passing the boundary of that forest, that's it. You cannot contest it. Something that line. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. This one map policy is the new initiative, and just that a few years ago, and we try to improve the data every 6 months. So for the time being, we have not used to that direction, because we still need to improve the data from time to time, and at the same time also, because there are so many land conflict, there are mechanisms also that we call it as claim and verification. This mechanism also used to as part of the way to improve our data. I think in the future, where the data, that one map, will reach a certain level of confidence that we could use that for the purpose that you mentioned. I think we will move to that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. We're running out of time, but I see just one question down there, and then I will ask the panelists to give their take-home message for the audience.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Sumaya Omar from Sudan, Forest National Corporation, and manager of Carbon Sequestration Project. I would like to appreciate the so informative speech and the Zambia developing of forest management system, and the way you extended the involvement of stakeholders down to community level. My question is, how can you detect the accuracy of the data before reporting? And the second question, did you consider the assumption of that the policymakers should change their mind in accordance to land use? This, I think, would disturb the existing MRV system and the monitoring system. Thank you very much.
In terms of accuracy, the system has been designed in such a way that there is a web portal that has been designed. Now, the provincial officers will be able to go in the field and undertake assessments for any particular thing. It might be maybe an agricultural investment, and which might have an implication on changing the changes over the maybe land use and all that. Once they have detected that and they have checked in the field, they will not change the national system. Like they go in the field and see that there is change, and then they go and then access the national system and make changes there. The system is in such a way that the provincial staff will be able to see the change in the field and then report to the national system. There must be an administrator there that will ensure or change things. Yeah, if you allow everyone to change, it will be unreliable. So one has to verify that what has been reported is okay. In fact, that web portal that has been developed also has a wiki where members of the public can still question certain things or provide information. And then the administrator can ask the field staff to undertake the verification process, and then in the end report or change the report on the changes that have occurred. I think that's how the accuracy has been put in place. It will not be everyone to change the national system. There must be someone who will be responsible for that. Now, in terms of decentralization, who has decided on to put it that way? I think this has come from experience that it's always good to get or to involve the people that actually are practically doing things in the field. And I think for Zambia, there is even a decentralization policy, which is basically trying to take things to the people. And I think we are moving within government policy, and only that we have to translate it in different ways based on the work that we do. But we have a decentralization policy as government, and we are trying to follow that policy. Thank you.
Well, I think it's been an interesting exchange of views. It's always difficult when you talk about national forest monitoring systems, MRV, to decouple from technicalities. But I think that, and the questions and the presentations illustrate that, but there's been a lot of information in the presentations illustrated what the essence of this monitoring is and how useful it could be for many purposes. So if you go home now, after this panel, and been listening to each other and to the questions, in one sentence, what you take home in terms of national forest monitoring systems. Lucio?
Okay. I think that for at least for the developing countries, they take advantage of the moment where the financing is available in order to build multifunctional systems that support domestical necessities of information to guarantee the enforcement of law. I think that this is the most important message that I would like to let.
Giacomo, the message I'd like to give is that REDD, of course, is about carbon and mitigation, but there is a spillover effect which in my view may be even more important, which is the one of incentivizing a better land planning. Contrary to Europe, which developed forest information system with a very strict silviculture objective, and then other questions have been added with some difficulties, developing countries have the chance now to start many cases nearly from zero and to build this multifunctionality from the very beginning. And multifunctional information system will allow REDD to go beyond carbon and to incentivizing a better land planning.
To have a flexible system that could provide information for different reporting purposes. It will help us to not to add the burden for us for the future need for reporting for different purposes.
Last but not least.
Thank you. Now, the information system is very important. As they say, information is power. But as we develop these systems, let the system be practical. That way, we will achieve more in our planning system.
Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for the audience to put forward questions. I think that there has been a very interesting exchange where we can see that REDD has been catalyzing the thinking in terms of how important information systems are, how important information is. And it's been bringing developing countries into this thinking, which developed countries were already there, and they still have challenges. I mean, I think it's fair to say that developed countries have been fighting with this for 100 years, while developing countries are just starting. And if we have to judge the speed, I think they are much better on the speed than we were as developed world before. So with this, I think we just finalize the session. Thank you very much, and enjoy your coffee, although it may be a little bit later.